Welcome to the second session of our SCITT into primary religious education. Now, the aim of this second session traditionally was to explore in a little bit more depth teaching and learning within the subject, and it would be a time for us to explore, discuss and kind of showcase different activities and great pedagogies that you could use and draw upon. Obviously, that's had to be amended and adapted for this more virtual session, so I'll go through a little bit of information and then I'll give you some signposts towards some self-directed inquiry into a number of videos and a number of resources that you can look at, evaluate, and then draw upon eventually in your own practice. So you'll recall that last session we considered what the aims of religious education could be, as well as looking at the Bedfordshire Agreed Syllabus. This session we're going to consider teaching and learning in the subject and also post you towards a few example lessons and resources. Now, before we have a look at this together, I thought it'd be really useful just to overview a few of the different pedagogies and approaches which have emerged over the history of religious education, because indeed one of the main aspects of RE is the question of how do we best enable pupils to understand the complexity and the reality of religiosity and non-religious stances as they exist in contemporary society. Now, within the 1960s, it was very much a confessional approach. So the assumption was there that all pupils were Christian, or if they weren't Christian, that they should be. So the subject of religious instruction went through kind of the Bible step by step and the main characters. And there was little focus on other religious traditions whatsoever. Rightly so, at the end of the 1960s and the start of the 1970s, this confessional approach to the subject was challenged. And within the research and the discussions in education were very much, what does it mean to be educated? And with the fact that society was becoming more multicultural, alongside all of these other discussions in education, there emerged something called the phenomenological approach. So this was thinking about how could we take each religion in turn and understand it, but not understand it as an insider, but to take a step back and kind of observe Islam and Sikhism and Hinduism from the outside. And whilst that was really useful in in principle, in reality, it emerged that this approach to phenomenological was kind of faulted in a few ways. First of all, it focused too much on what people did, what they looked like, festivals, to the neglect of beliefs. And second of all, it's very stereotypical. It kind of framed each religion as an egg, as it were, kind of a bounded entity which could exist on its own. And we could crack into the egg of Christianity, which is essentially the same as Islam, essentially the same as Sikhism, in so much as they have kind of key founders or people, and they have founding narratives, and they all do similar things, but just with different flavours of religiosity. And although that you could make the argument, and that's the case within some of the religions, and you could make more of a comparison between Islam, Judaism and Christianity, the Abrahamic faiths, to put those lens and frames around Eastern religions such as Hinduism, Buddhism or Sikhism was a little bit more problematic. In 1980s, there was the experiential aspect of religious education, so we can get pupils to pretend or experience certain aspects of religions such as festivals or rites of passage, obviously in a classroom objective sense. The thought was that would allow pupils to understand those religious and spiritual traditions a little bit more. In 1987, a really key work came to the fore, and that was Michael Grimmett's work on RE and human development. And his approach was really influential in the subject because he thought that there needs to be this balance between learning about different religions and worldviews and also learning from. And it shouldn't just be a case that we should learn about in terms of knowledge of key dates, events within religions, there should also be a space for pupils to reflect on what they learn. So what emerged from that was something called the twin attainment targets, 81 and 82, learning about religion and learning from religion. And we can kind of see how that's informed our religious literacy debate, wherein having that balanced and informed conversation about religion and belief requires A, subject knowledge, and B, personal and critical reflection from pupils, and it shouldn't be one to the neglect of the other. However, where that got a bit problematic in teachers' experience was that they became very, very isolated. This part of the lesson we're going to learn about religion, and this part of the lesson, maybe in the plenary, we'll do a bit of reflection. And sometimes that was a little bit too forced and didn't make sense. So that has now kind of been dropped, yet informed the religious literacy debates at the moment. In the 1990s, we had the ethnographic approach appear, which has been really useful. So it's the idea of getting actual voices of religious and non-religious people into the classroom. So it could be through case studies, it could be through quotes. A little bit of a word of warning here, though, in that when you select different voices to speak into the RE classroom, as it were, you have to think about, well, whose voices are we choosing? Which voices are being kind of the gatekeepers into that religious community, and which perspectives are being Premier League? So it's always worth getting a variety of voices into the classroom where possible. And then this really important one of a concept-based approach. And I touched upon this a little bit last time. Now, concept-based approaches are really fruitful in that although there is diversity, there are arguably these fundamental concepts which underpin different religious traditions. So within Christianity, it could be the concept of God. And yes, there might be lots of different diversity and different ideas within Christianity about what God is like. There is still that shared concept of God, or perhaps that's even good news in gospel, or it's salvation. You'll be really hard pressed to find a Christian that doesn't have a view on how Jesus saves them. And there may be different views on salvation, but there is still that concept of salvation which underpins Christianity. And there's some amazing units within the agreed syllabus which helps pupils to inquire into that and helps us as teacher to facilitate those inquiries. And that kind of brings us to the 2010s. With the 2000s, critical realism very much had an influence in secondary school, particularly with GCSE and A-level, but we'll bypass that for now based on what our present concerns are. So within the history of religious education and how it's evolved from the 1960s to today, lots of those pedagogical approaches have dovetailed together into what effective RE is, because there's lots of different aspects that you can magpie from the experiential approach, from the ethnographic approach, from the phenomenological approach, which can be really rich in some amazing RE teaching and learning. So for the rest of this session, in this final slide, I've set up two tasks which I think would be really useful for you to look into. So the first one is to watch the first 6 videos showcasing good learning in RE. So they'll be found on the Natre website, to which you can see the link. But if you just type into Google good learning in RE films and Natre, then they should appear quite easily. Now, do be in mind with these that these are really useful lessons that we could use, but those lessons aren't access cold. So there'll likely be a few lessons before and a few lessons after. And so do think about where this lesson fits well within a learning sequence, within a unit of learning. Also attached, or rather on the platform, is a document which has lots of different websites which are really useful in terms of RE videos, learning and other aspects. So do explore those web links. In particular, the TrueTube website is excellent, the Request and Restart, and also the BBC videos. The recent ones in particular are really, really great. So I hope you enjoy having a look and exploring these RE resources. And as I mentioned before, if you have any questions about RE or anything that you'd like to discuss, just get in contact with Caroline and Jackie, and we'll organise a meeting to chat together. All the best. Bye.